I can't even imagine. Have you heard those words and thought to yourself, neither can I? But it happened. You lived it. But most importantly, you survived it. We hear you, we see you, and we're here to talk about it. We're two moms, lifelong best friends, and we've both experienced traumatic, life-altering events involving our children. Welcome to episode 2 of I Can't Even Imagine. Hello, Victoria. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So what do you think about the last 6 days that we've had so far since the release?
I think it's great. We've had a lot of positive feedback, and I'm just looking forward to see how big we can get this.
We've had quite a bit of support. I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. We're really incredibly grateful and really excited. Surprised even over just the amount that we've had in the last 6 days. It really kind of shows that there's a need for this topic. So thank you. And check us out. Go find us on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. So speaking of Instagram, actually, if you can't find us on Instagram for the moment, we might have to start over because they hate us right now.
Yep.
I don't know why, but I've got 4 very what's the word I'm looking for? Non-controversial posts, and our account has been suspended almost every single day, and I keep having to appeal it. So I'm not sure what's going on with them, but we may have to start over fresh. But there wasn't a whole lot of followers on there to start with. But if you already are following us there, just know that we might have to make an announcement that you'll have to come and find us again somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
to refollow.
With that being said, so today's episode is going to be about my story involving my son and a pretty scary diagnosis that we had to deal with a few years ago. But other than that, Victoria's a little under the weather.
A little bit.
Put that out there. So if she sounds a little funny, that's why. Please don't judge her.
Yep. Trying not to mouth breathe into the microphone.
If you hear there's that's her.
Stop, you're
I told her
cough.
I told her that she was going to be like that. I don't forget his name, but the character, the mouth breather from Hey Arnold.
Oh yeah.
Now we're giving away how old we are by saying that, but if you remember Nickelodeon back in the day.
Yep. I started to feel a little bit funky on Saturday. And Saturday night I reached out to a friend of mine because she sells fire cider.
Ooh.
And she was gracious enough to drop it off to me Sunday morning. So that's helped a ton. And it's not my favorite taste in the world, but it works.
Oh, no. Yeah, I attempted to make my own fire cider a few years ago, and I took one very tiny sip and about died and wanted to throw up and threw the rest outside because it was so gross.
I made it, I want to say probably 6 or 7 years ago at this point. And I gave it to my mom for Christmas. I gave her a little bit of it, and it knocked whatever she had completely out. It worked so well for her. I was too nervous to try it. The smell alone was horrendous.
Now, for those who don't know what fire cider is, Victoria, can you give them a little bit of a summary?
Yeah, so it's apple cider vinegar and lots of hot things, jalapenos, horseradish. You've got some onion in there. And then you sweeten it with honey, and that helps a little, at least with mine. I don't know. This one that my friend Stephanie, our friend Stephanie makes is far superior to what I created. I don't even know if I made it right.
I don't know if I made mine right either. I looked at some recipes and kind of threw it all together into one jar, let it sit in my window and ferment for a while.
Yes, it's exactly what I did. And I don't know, Stephanie does a great job at it. So I should shout her out.
Absolutely. You should. She's awesome.
Yeah, she does. She said she does shipping, just not with the fire cider, but she does local delivery. Her company's name is Good Hearted Mama, and you can find her at goodheartedmama.com. And she does a lot of vendor events throughout the southern Florida area. So
yeah, I've got one from her called I think it's called Simmer Down Now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like to calm your anxiety and nerves. I got that from my daughter when she has trouble at night sleeping.
Yeah, she has a lot of tinctures.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
thank you, Steph, for helping Victoria out.
For sure.
We love you.
Couldn't have been here without it.
Let's segue into my story, my very long story.
Yeah.
All right. So
Buckle up.
Yes, buckle up. Bear with me, guys. It's a sad one. It's an important one. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. So on Monday, July 31st of 2017, we got up and ready like any other day. I dropped my son and my daughter off at my mother-in-law's when I went to work. At the time, I was working part-time 3 days a week at a local birth center. I was also pregnant. I was pregnant with our third baby. And while I was at work, my mother-in-law texted me that she noticed my son's jaw was really puffy and swollen. So she sent me a picture, and she immediately thought it was mumps, but we also thought it may have been an infection, like an abscess tooth or something. 'Cause it was right on his jaw, so that's what it looked like to me right away. So I got him an appointment with the dentist immediately, and she took him to the dentist. They did x-rays and an exam and couldn't find anything. And the dentist was adamant that we take him to the ER, but he never explained why. And, not only did that not make a whole lot of sense, but also kind of scared us. We were like, well, why would he say that? And why would he not elaborate? Why do I want to take my kid to a place where a bunch of sick people are congregating? And what if he's already fighting something? I want to give him something else on top of what he's already dealing with, So that just was really weird. But he wouldn't elaborate. And so I just said, let's take him to his primary care physician, because they have his record, even though he hadn't stepped foot in there for a while. But they did have his record. So I was able to leave work, and I met my husband and my mother-in-law at the pediatrician's office later that same day. And they barely touched him. They looked at him, said that it was a swollen lymph node, and gave us a prescription for an antibiotic, just like I figured they would, and sent us on our way. So he was seen 2 days later, and we were told that he was making progress. During that time, I wanted a second opinion, because I believe the antibiotic was a 10-day antibiotic. So I wanted a second opinion, and I took him to a holistic doctor in that area that I was familiar with, and looking him over, and even just myself at home Googling all his symptoms, we thought he had mumps. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe we're getting somewhere. And we finally have an answer. So had him tested, and it came back negative, no mumps. So near the end of that round of antibiotics, he started to feel better, and the swelling went away. We thought that was that. He went back to his happy and playful self. But on August 11th, my grandmother came to visit, and, this is someone who only sees my son a couple of times a year. And she was commenting on how pale he is. And I didn't see it then. But looking back on it now, I'd like to see pictures. He was definitely, he looked different. It's kind of hard to explain it exactly, but he didn't look like himself. And he was a little more reserved. And my son, none of my kids are introverted. They're all extroverted.
Right.
They're all like me.
Yeah.
They talk to anybody and everybody who will listen.
True.
So, so that was on August 11th, and he was getting ready to start preschool. And I was so excited for him. And so he started preschool on Monday, which was August 14th. 2017, and 2 days later he woke up and the swelling was back. So this time it was on both the right and the left jaw. And we were like, okay, well, we've exhausted our options. We did the dentist. They said go to the ER. We went to the pediatrician. They said, oh, here's an antibiotic. Antibiotic didn't work. Thought maybe it was mumps. Got the blood test for mumps. That came back negative. We didn't really know what to do at that point, so I said, okay. And I'm not the kind of mom that's going to rush to the ER for some people go to the ER for fevers, and I try to avoid that place like the plague. And so it was a lot for me to say, okay, let's take this kid to the ER. So off we go to the ER, and he not only had swelling in his glands, but his spleen was enlarged, and his abdomen was super tender to the touch. And I could see the worry in the doctor's eyes who was checking him over in triage. And I remember them coming in with this huge tray of vials for all the tests that they were doing for him, just vial after vial of blood that they were taking out of my kid. And I had some experience in understanding lab work because I worked at the birth center and I had to do the lab orders for all of the women who came in. And so I was like, well, trying to beat around the bush and figure out what they were doing. I'm like, well, what are you ordering? Are you getting a CBC? And trying to kind of like talk their lingo a little bit. And they kept kind of like shooing me away. Because something was up. You know,
they probably had an indication of what was going on, but they didn't want to scare you until they knew.
Correct. So we were just forced to just wait. And so my husband, his name is Joe, we were pulled into another room to discuss the results. And that's when you know the answer is not a good one, when you get pulled into a side room.
I know that.
We were told that they suspected leukemia, and that the official results would be in the next day because they still had to do a bone marrow biopsy and send that off. And I believe that had to be sent off to Tampa and come back. But not only that, he was also severely anemic, which would explain why he was so pale. And he had a staph infection in his blood to boot. So we were admitted right away, and we moved up the stairs of the hospital. And after more and more tests and pokes and prods and vital checks all night long, a night of 104, 105 fevers, no sleep, we were told that my son had standard risk acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's a really weird explaining her story because so many things are so vivid in my memory, and there's so many things that I don't remember at all. And
right.
We were talking before we started recording, Victoria and I were kind of reflecting, and I'm like, do you remember where you were that day? And like, I remember that I did talk to her, but I don't remember any details about that phone call at all. I remember what I was wearing that day.
Interesting.
But I don't remember like you coming to the hospital. I don't remember what we talked about, how I told you.
Yeah, you called me immediately, I think. And I remember I was in a parking lot. I remember I was in the passenger side. My husband was driving. And he was in the store and he hadn't come back out yet. And you had called me and I was like, I didn't even know what to say. Because prior to this, you'd been talking about your son had been just uncomfortable, kind of whiny, I guess, in a way. Like you just not able to calm down and
he was being a bit extra. And I'm like, okay,
right.
Well, he's 4 years old.
Right.
Maybe he's going through a growth spurt. Something's going on. But I've also found periodically looking through my phone, looking back at old pictures, there's a specific picture of him laying on the couch, like taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon. And like, that was not him.
Right.
You know, was not that kind of kid. Like he had outgrown naps pretty early, you know, and he was sleeping in the middle of the afternoon. I'm like, okay, so I guess you're not feeling good or you're going through a growth spurt or something like that. You know?
Yeah, because we had watched your son and your daughter for an afternoon, and he, at that point, I think it was right after we had talked about him just not being able to just be settled. Mm-hmm. And we saw it too. And I remember he was trying to take a nap on the couch and like half of his body's on the couch and his feet are on the floor. Like he just couldn't get comfortable. Mm-hmm. But it was like, this is not what we would have, I mean, how would we have ever known?
Right.
Any of us.
Right.
Looking, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, people ask me all the time, like, well, how did you find out? What are the signs of leukemia? And I said, well, aside from the swollen lymph nodes, I mean,
typical 4-year-old behavior,
I would have
right?
had no idea.
Yeah.
But then when I really think about it, you know, he was taking swim lessons. It was just really weird timing, but he was taking swim lessons and his legs were hurting. He kept complaining about his legs hurting. And I remember distinctly one day him running around at grandma's house and then just stopping and screaming in pain. And lo and behold, his bones were hurting because they were, you know, filled with cancer and we had no idea. But at that time, you know, with him doing swim lessons, I remember one day he kind of like hopped off the side of the pool really funny and like his hip was out of alignment. And we thought, okay, well, he's doing new activities, working muscles he hasn't worked probably, is, taking these swim lessons. He's just achy because of his swim lessons. And we took him to the chiropractor. Yes, he was out of alignment and got him adjusted, and he seemed fine. And then a couple days later, those behaviors would start again.
Right.
But again, we were like, that's the last possible thing in your mind that you could think, is that your child has cancer when they're complaining about their legs hurting.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like typical 4-year-old things, like the extra whininess. Maybe he's going through a growth spurt. Maybe he's just starting to feel his feelings.
Growing pains.
Yeah. I mean, you can, all of these things that you can chalk up to whatever,
Yeah.
But that's actually, as a parent, it's really scary.
Very, yeah.
Because what are the signs? Well, you don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
So other than that, we had the bone pain, kind of acting a bit out of sorts, and that he was really pale. Again, pale just because I'm pale, so I didn't really see it.
Right. You're fair-skinned.
I'm fair-skinned. I'm like Snow White. It was a really big punch in the face to get that diagnosis. And just to give you a little bit about me, myself and Victoria included, but I've kind of been on a more of like a mindful, natural parenting path for a really long time. And long before this diagnosis, I had already done things in my household, like replaced our beauty products and replaced our household cleaners and stuff like that. So I was already kind of living like this, I'll call it crunchy or scrunchy or whatever you want to call it, but low toxic lifestyle.
Yeah.
And, you get hit with your child has cancer and what's coming.
Yeah.
The treatment for cancer includes things like chemotherapy. Yeah. At the time, I didn't know about all the other things. I really just thought it was only chemotherapy, but it was chemotherapy and antibiotics and steroids primarily. So yeah, we were inpatient for 12 long, miserable days because they also had to treat the staph infection that he had, because most kids would stay in right after diagnosis of probably about 5 days and then be sent home. But we had an extended stay because of all the other issues that were going on. So he didn't eat. He lost a ton of weight. I mean, for a kid that's only 4, I mean, you see the pictures from the day he was admitted to the day we came home. It was 12 days. It was like a totally different kid. And I was so stressed out about the fact that he wasn't eating, but they kept reassuring me, like, once the steroids kick in, that he would eat nonstop. And they actually said he will pick a particular food and he will eat it, quote unquote, like it's his last meal. And sure enough, this kid ended up eating Papa John's pizza with garlic sauce, washed down with a glass of milk. It was the only thing that kid would eat for almost an entire month.
Yeah. I remember you very specifically saying that this wouldn't be the food that you would choose for him to want to eat.
Not at all.
But at this point, he's eating.
Right.
And you were so happy that he was eating.
I remember when that kid took a couple bites of a pancake, that the hospital food that they give you, which is garbage, but they brought him pancakes. And when he ate a bite of, I cried. Just when he ate a pancake, I cried.
I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah, you know exactly how I feel. I cried because they said a calorie is a calorie. Whatever you can get in him, let him have it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And when you're in that time in your life, as much as in your normalness, you would not agree to that at all. You're like, yeah, let him eat the fucking pancakes. Let him eat the pizza.
Yeah. Whatever he wants.
Whatever he wants.
Yep.
So he was diagnosed on August 16th. And like I said earlier, I was pregnant. I was due with our third on August 24th. I actually remember nurses teasing me and taking bets on when I was going to go into labor. And they were joking like, oh, well, at least you're already here at the hospital if you pop. And I'm like laughing to myself because I'm like, yeah, well, I'm having my child at a birth center, not here.
Right.
They thought I was crazy, I'm sure, but
probably.
Yeah. So actually, after the 12 days, 3 days later, after we were discharged, I went into labor on my own. And had my little one, and 10 days following the birth of our third, we rode out Hurricane Irma. That was a blast. So no power for nearly 2 weeks with medication that needed constant refrigeration. And here I had a 4-year-old son who could not walk because he was in so much pain, and a 2-year-old daughter whose world got flipped upside down. And now, not only that, she's the middle child all of a sudden, and a newborn.
Yeah.
And I just kept picturing when the news would come on, it was saying that, it was going to be a Category 5 and we were going to have storm surge like you hadn't seen in history. And I kept thinking back on, remember Hurricane Irma? Hurricane Katrina.
Uh-huh.
You remember like the footage of like the families waiting to be rescued, standing on top of their houses, like that picture.
Not only that,
yeah,
but there was a hurricane that had hit Houston about 10 days or so before Hurricane Irma, and all the news footage of people on their roof because the storm surge had come up all the way to their roof line.
Yeah.
They had to crawl out their windows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at my grandma's house to ride out the storm because she was higher elevation.
Which one was that? Do you remember the name of that one?
I have no idea.
I don't remember the name
but that
of
was
that
like
one.
10 days prior to Irma. And we all went to my grandma's. My mom, my stepdad, my husband, my 4 kids, my grandma, and her 2 cats were there at this house. And we got a knock at the door saying we were in a mandatory evacuation because apparently this house is within 1 mile of the river. And I'm like, we got to go, because I'm thinking all of those houses, people on their roof in Houston. And the last thing I'm going to do, swim out of this window with my grandma. She's not leaving her cats, so now we're going to have to get the cats, sit on this roof with 4 kids.
Yeah. That's all I kept. I could not sleep at all. And I'm the kind, I love sleep. I don't have any problem going to sleep. You give me the opportunity to sleep, I'm good. I'm going to sleep.
Right.
And yeah, I remember distinctly laying on the couch with our newborn, and I believe my daughter was probably with a family member helping us out, and my husband was taking care of our oldest in our bedroom, and seeing the footage and not the footage, but the all of the meteorologists talking about Hurricane Irma, and we were going to see always unprecedented, never before seen storm surge and Category 5. And I just kept picturing I had those images of families standing on their roofs with their kids and waiting to be rescued. And here I'm thinking, all right, I have to have baby wear. I'll have my toddler on my back, my brand new 10-day-old infant on my chest, and somehow my husband's going to have to carry our son who can't walk. Do I have another baby carrier that, big enough to hold him? And what if we have to use an axe to break through the ceiling to get on the most ridiculous thoughts
totally
flying through my brain of how we're going to survive this thing, what we're going to do if our neighborhood floods. Just intrusive thoughts. And we couldn't leave because we had to get approval from the hospital, from our primary oncologist, because they had to communicate with the hospitals up in the northern part of the state. And finally, like the day before this stupid thing hit, they're like, okay, you guys have permission to go up to Gainesville, and we're going to fax over all of your records, so they'll take care of you. And we're like, we can't go anywhere now. These roads are going to be completely gridlocked.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just a PSA. There's no way that being as far south in the state as we are, to get out of the state, you're a good 10 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah, we're Southwest Florida. We're
very
2
far
hours
south.
Yes, we're very close to the Everglades, and we're 2 hours south of Tampa.
Right.
To give you an idea where we're at.
You're going to be stuck in traffic.
Yep.
Or if you're not stuck in traffic, there's going to be no gas.
Yep.
At all. So
Yeah.
good luck leaving 24 hours before this thing hits.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me permission right before this stupid thing hits.
Right.
So, needless to say, we rode out the thing. Thankfully, my mother-in-law's house is a concrete structure. Ours is wood. So we I remember taking all of our like sentimental things and putting them up high up in the closets, taking things I really, really cared about. I'm a photographer, so naturally I'm very sentimental. I took all of our photos, and photo albums was like the very first thing that I got, aside from like the obvious like medications and stuff. And wrapped that stuff up, brought it with me, and then took everything else like my camera equipment, took pictures of it all for insurance purposes, took pictures and videos of the whole house for insurance purposes, and we had our elders from our church come and pray over our home, and went to my mother-in-law's and rode out the storm. So I thought, okay, if I can have a newborn, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old with cancer and ride out a hurricane, I'm like, damn, we can survive anything, you know? We were without power for almost 2 weeks. I remember when power was starting to come back around the county, my husband would drive all over just to hunt down pizza. We had actually stockpiled 6 pizzas for the hurricane, and he went through them in probably 3 days.
Yeah. So what did you guys do when you were out of power?
We were shuffled around. So luckily, my mom actually lives on the same electric grid as a big high school, and she got power back pretty early, but she has a really small house. She has a really 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and she also like took in some friend of hers and her family. So it was like Joe actually just stayed put. So it was me and the kids plus this whole big family, and it was just too much. So I was like a bit uncomfortable with all that. So I really wanted to be with all of my family together. And I got a call from my boss at the time. She knew what we were going through, and she said, you guys are welcome to come here and spend the night. We have electricity, we have water, we have all the things. So I felt much more at ease with that. So we packed up everything. We went and we spent the night at the birth center. But, you know, they were still running a business. You know, they still had, we listened to a mom give birth that night. Which was kind of cool because I love that kind of stuff.
So you stayed at the birth center?
So we stayed at the birth center for, I believe, 1 or 2 nights. And then the rest of the time, one of the midwives there, she's not there anymore, but she was super sweet. And she said that they had power, and she opened her home to us. And so we ended up kind of moving in with her for about a week, her and her boyfriend. And they took such great care of us and bought the kids gifts and like really doted on them. It was super sweet. So we were able to keep all of his medication and everything refrigerated and where it needed to be. But that was a really, really stressful couple of weeks there on top of, you know, the diagnosis and everything else that was going on. But not too much longer after that, day 29 following his diagnosis, we were given the wonderful news that he was in remission. And we ended up continuing treatment for 26 months. And he finally finished on October 19th, 2019.
So remission doesn't mean cured though, right? Because I know a lot of people talk about I'm in remission or they're in remission. And that's almost like at the start.
Yeah. So leukemia is, when you say somebody with leukemia is in remission, it's a lot different than saying somebody with a tumor, right, for example, is in remission. Remission, their goal right off the bat is within that first month. It's like they throw everything at them as far as chemotherapy and drugs are concerned. They throw everything at them. It's really intense. And then they get them into remission. And then the remaining years of treatment is all prophylactic. It's all preventative. Right. And a lot of people don't understand that. So when they think like he's been cured and he's been done since that September when they said he was in remission, but he technically isn't cured. They say they don't call them cured for 5 years after the end of treatment. Right. So that's 5 years after October 19th, 2019, which is actually coming up this year, which is really great. But yeah, remission does not mean cured. No, not at all. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, another kind of question that I get asked a lot when people want to know about our story, and I run into this a lot when I talk to other cancer moms too, is a lot of people don't realize that children don't actually have a choice when it comes to treatment. So like you're assigned a plan and you're stuck with that plan. That's that. When you're an adult, you get a diagnosis, you can say, well, I don't really want to do it this way.
What are my options?
You can say, what are my options? I don't really want to do it this way. What if I want to seek alternative treatments? You can sign an AMA, and you can leave. With a kid, you can't do that. So I knew that going into it, thankfully, because if I were to fight the system and try to treat my son on my own, which I wouldn't do, but if not even just that, but like if I wanted a second opinion, if I wanted to take him to a treatment center out of the state or out of the country or anything like that, I'm not allowed to do that because they look at that as I am endangering his life, and they can report us to Child Protective Services and they can kidnap him. He could be medically kidnapped. So that actually happened not too long after my son's diagnosis to a family, I believe, and it was like the Tampa area. And that got like countrywide attention. And they actually took their kid to another state and like got tracked down by like the feds. Like it was a huge...
Dang.
Yeah, it was a huge thing. Got taken away from them and was forced to go. I mean, imagine being a child being forced to undergo these really intense drugs without the support and love of your parents.
Right.
That's got to be absolutely horrifying. So I knew that was a risk, and I wasn't about to take that risk. So as much as I hated the thought of him having to go through chemotherapy, we made that decision. We're going to do what we can to best support him through that process, to best combat all of those horrible side effects.
What kind of stuff did you guys do to help combat the side effects? Because the side effects of the chemo and the steroids are vast.
Extremely. Honestly, what didn't we do?
Right.
Yeah. I lost a lot of sleep because I was staying up at night just researching and researching. There's actually a really wonderful group on Facebook called Mindful Cancer Parents, and I spent a lot of time asking questions in that group. I was reading studies after study after study. I did things from acupuncture to chiropractic to hyperbaric oxygen treatments to oh gosh, there's so many. We bought an infrared biomat, which was really helpful. It's kind of like, think of like a heating pad, but it's like it heats your body up internally. Okay. Instead of feeling the heat on the outside, it like penetrates in through like your organs and stuff. We did that. We did so many different herbal supplements and vitamins. I actually was very lucky that I had a brand new baby at the time because I was breastfeeding. And I remember sitting down with our oncologist and talking about like, well, what can I give him elderberry? Is anything going to interfere with his medications? Can I give him vitamin C? And he kind of just laughed at me. I was like, yeah, his vitamin C is pointless. He's just going to pee it out. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But, I asked him, well, I'm going to have a brand new baby. Can I give him breast milk? And my oncologist laughed at us. He straight up was like, I have been doing this for over 30 years and I have never been asked that question before.
Really?
Yeah. I was surprised too. And
Your son was only 4.
Yeah.
I mean, there are still kids that are nursing at 4.
Yeah.
Like,
he thought I was nuts.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, even like, I think it's even like the WHO says that you should breastfeed until I think they changed their standards to like 2 or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know. But like the worldwide average is still toddlerhood. Yeah. But not US,
No.
We do things weird over here. So, yeah, he was like, well, it certainly can't hurt him. And I'm like thinking to myself, yeah, duh. Duh. So, I actually had, the haka, the breastfeeding little like suction cup that goes on your other breast while you're nursing. It catches all like the drips. Catches all the drips. Yep. I was able to get so much extra milk just from using that on the other side, what opposite side I was nursing from, and I would take any of that extra I could get because I was never an oversupplier. I would say I was a just enougher.
Me too.
Right. Yeah, never had an oversupply. So it wasn't like, I could feed my baby and then pump and have all this extra like on reserve for him or anything like that. So anything that I could get from the haka, I went straight into my son's cup of milk and washed down with that pizza.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, at least it's doing something. He's getting like antibodies and, he's getting some extra goodness that is liquid gold, baby, So yeah, that was one of the things we did. The very first thing that we did was we got his medical marijuana card. Okay. that was probably, as soon as we got out of the hospital, that was the first thing that we did. And we got him like a dropper, like a THC little tincture. And he would basically use that during steroid pulses. So steroid pulses where you have to take, the kids have to take steroids for 5 days every month. And it just makes them crazy. It's just so, it's awful. And, you hear like roid rage, but for him, it wasn't really roid rage. It was like the roid blues. Like he was so sad, and miserable. And so like the days that he would have to take that, and then the days where I knew he would have to get the lumbar puncture and get chemo in his spine, we would give him that at night. And I remember like the first times we give it to him and we're like, oh my gosh, our son is high right now. Like just look at his eyes. They're so bloodshot. We're like, you got to look for the silver linings and laugh where you can. But it was a little funny. I have to admit, it was funny to see your kid stoned, he's only 4 years old. But it helped him sleep. It helped him with the pain, so we were very thankful for that.
I mean, it's medicinal for a reason.
It is. It's medicinal for a reason.
To do that for him.
Yeah. So alternative treatments, we did a lot of things. And we did stuff from, all that I already listed to, says the liver is incredibly affected from all those drugs. So we did Pau d'Arco was one of the herbs that we used. Milk thistle was one of the herbs that we used. I had essential oils. There's actually a really great, if anybody listening has a kid going through anything like this, to check out Kick Cancer. Kick, K-I-C-K, Kick Cancer. It's a foundation where they actually supply families with a kit of like natural remedies and supplementation and things like that. I think they even do like grass-fed, grass-finished beef sticks, and they had essential oils with the directions on how to use them and what they're used for. And so like we would load him up with essential oil rollers before he went to the hospital. And I mean, we did so many things. So many things. We had a special one that we rubbed over his liver. I really wish we would have gotten into like castor oil packs. We didn't actually do them at the time, but nowadays I think castor oil packs are great. I do them for myself. But we did a lot of different things. After he was done with treatment, I even met with a homeopath because he had really bad rashes throughout. The chemo was just horrendous. And he had what they call chemo rash. And when he was coming off of the chemo, it was kind of like a withdrawal symptom. He had horrible like hives. And so we saw a homeopath for that. And she got us on a whole like protocol of different things for yeast and candida, and kind of just because anything that comes out on your skin is your inside screaming. Right. So we did that protocol and cleared him right up. So, I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. I mean, I could sit here and talk for hours, but I'm not going to. Yeah. But, in doing all this, not just the conventional way, but also the alternative way is not only incredibly just taxing on you emotionally, but nobody really talks about financial struggle. Just as an example, one dose of one of the infusions, one of the chemo infusions he had to get, I looked at the bill, was $93,000.
He had to have it.
He had to have. He had it twice. He had to
save a kid's life.
Twice.
And it cost $93,000.
$93,000. And this was back in 2017.
Yeah, those aren't 2024 prices.
Those are not 2024 prices. No.
That's
so intense. I don't even want to know what that costs for families today. But we firmly believe that my husband was placed in his job title, his position, because he works actually for our local hospital system. And he has the insurance that they provide, that he was put in this position because the Lord knew what was going to happen to us. And the insurance paid for a lot, probably a lot more than some of the more like traditional insurance companies do. But we still had to, we had a GoFundMe. I think you set that up for us, right?
I did.
We had the GoFundMe. We had the meal train. We were linked to a whole bunch of different foundations locally and nationally. But on that note, I do want to point out while I'm here on the podcast that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So it's kind of funny that we didn't really plan that we were going to do this podcast in the beginning of September, but here we are. So I thought it would be a really great opportunity to mention that. But if you're one of those people that do like to give to foundations, I don't recommend giving it to the big names. I recommend supporting your local people because those are the people that are doing the real work.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are actually making the biggest difference. Find who your local people are, whether that's your city or your state, for foundations if you feel called to donate to anything like that, or just straight up donate right to the families. That's really what's going to make a difference, instead of, when you're at the checkout line at the grocery store and they say, oh, do you want to donate to St. Jude's? No, I don't want to donate to St. Jude's. And in fact, St. Jude's actually sucks. I'm just going to straight up. I'm allowed to say that because I'm a cancer mom. I've been there, done that. And St. Jude sucks. They just put up these smiling, happy faces of these little bald kids and act like it's all sunshine and rainbows and take your money and pay their CEOs. Right. So, like I said, your money's going to go a lot further and help a lot more people if you just keep it local or just hand it straight off to the families. And we are so incredibly thankful for the community outreach and love that we were given during that time from everybody.
So tell me why.
Well, we were involved with so many. There's a really great one, actually, that's national, but they have local branches called the Sunshine Kids Foundation. They're really good for, like, bringing smiles to their faces. So they'll do things like a whole group trip to Legoland. They'll do big holiday events. They'll do big Christmas events and give lots of gifts and things like that. So they're really cool for that in that regard. We were really involved back then. They're not a thing anymore, but there was a group called Fighting All Monsters, FAM for short, and they were really great at helping families monetarily. Instead of like just straight up giving gifts, which they'll provide some temporary happiness, but They were like, we want to do like put our money where our mouth. Like, we're not taking this money and like paying CEOs. We're just taking the money, whoever wants to donate, and we're giving it straight back to the families.
Right.
And that's what they did. I mean, they were handing $10,000 to a kid.
Yeah.
Saying, here, do what you want with it.
Yeah.
You've only got so much time left on this earth. Ball out.
Yeah.
Whether you want to, pay your bills with it or go have fun, that's up to you. But here's the money.
That's cool.
And I really appreciated that. But it's really the local people that make a difference. We had another one called Caleb's Crusade. They're not a thing anymore either, but Caleb's Crusade was actually the foundation that helped us replace our carpets. In our house. We had a really old, disgusting, you remember that Berber? That's horrible, cheap as could be carpet that you pull one string and the whole thing comes up.
I do.
But it like harbors everything. Yep. So if it's dirt, bacteria, mold, when we actually had issues with mold in this house years ago, and I was really worried about that. Here, I have a cancer kid going through treatment. This is disgusting. I got to get rid of this stuff. And we wanted to replace the carpets before he was even diagnosed. So that just kind of lit a fire under our butts to get it done. I remember while we were still in the hospital, I think it was you and my mom. Was it you and my mom that went to the house and like sterilized everything? I
don't remember.
Like, I remember because your cleaning company was in the early days of your business.
Yeah.
And you came, I remember like you were cleaning off even like the doorknobs and the light switches and like all of like, even like my mom went through all the toy box and like wiped down every single toy.
I have no memory of that.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
It's so weird. It's so weird. I wouldn't put it past me. That, of course, would be something that would need to be done.
Yeah.
And I'd be the gal to call.
Yeah. No, I remember you doing things like that. Trauma has a weird way of affecting your memory.
Yeah,
it's very strange. And with that being said, I just want to rattle off a few statistics that I think that the world should know. For Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, cancer is the #1 cause of death by disease among children. Speaking of finances, only 4% of government funding for cancer is allocated to pediatric cancer, which is absolutely infuriating. 2 out of 3 survivors will develop at least one chronic health condition, and more than 95% of survivors experience significant health-related issues by the age of 45. Another one that really ticks me is most standard treatments for pediatric cancer were approved over 30 years ago, and many of which were before the 1980s. It's ridiculous. My uncle, actually, my dad's younger brother actually died of the same leukemia, probably I think it was the early 1970s or late 60s, and they were using the same drugs back then. The only real difference is back then they were not treating for leukemia in the spinal fluid. They were only treating it in the blood, and they found out later that leukemia cells like to hide out in the spinal fluid, and then that's how kids would relapse.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why they developed doing all the lumbar punctures. So another thing, too, that's really interesting about treatment is that boys used to be treated for 3 years and girls used to be treated for 2.
Okay, why?
It's a really good question. It's a really silly answer, but decades ago, there was a really small study, and I was actually, prior to the episode, I was trying to find the study, and I just got distracted, but from what I remember, it was like a really small group of boys that they did a study on. I want to say it was like only like 7 kids. Like it was a really small group. And they were, and I could be wrong, so don't quote me, but I think it was 7. They discovered that leukemia cells were in the testicles. And so they were like, well, let's just throw another year of chemotherapy at it and maybe that'll help. Well, then,
did it help?
No, of course not. Adding a whole nother year of chemotherapy, they realized was doing more harm than good, but they didn't realize this for several decades later. Which brings me, actually, I haven't talked about this part yet, but I found out because my son was assigned the 3-year plan, and there was talk amongst the Mindful Cancer Parent group that there was going to be a change in the protocol, and they were going to change the boys from 3 years to 2 years, just like the girls. And I was like, oh, sweet. So I can get rid of a whole other year of, how do I do this? How to get a whole other year of off of all these drugs? That would be awesome, right? So I kind of came up with my own game plan and did a whole lot of research because I really wanted to tailor my son's treatment to him, right? Like,
you would think that they would do that automatically.
You would think that they would do that. But no, Western medicine is one size fits all, and we're just going to throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. If you die, you die. If you don't, great, And so I kind of came up with a game plan of what I wanted to introduce to our oncologist. And I actually had the privilege of speaking to kind of a bigwig in oncology who sits on the board of the Children's Oncology Group and the board of the NIH, which is, I think that's a pretty big deal, right? Because there's some good credentials. And he confirmed that rumor that they were going to be getting rid of that 3rd year. So I was like, all right, great. Well, I've got word from him. I'm sure that my oncologist knows who this guy is.
Sure.
And will respect his opinion. So I had a game plan of things I wanted to present, and I actually, this was about a year into treatment, just over a year into treatment, and came to our oncologist and said, this is what I want to do, and it was much more worded than that, of course. I was incredibly nervous. I had everything written out. I basically read from my phone, and like sitting next to my husband was like shaking the whole time while he was like holding on to me.
Right, because you probably walk in there like, who am I? I'm just a mom with journalism degree.
Is he really going to listen to me? Is he
Right.
Is he going to grant me any of these things that I want? And some of the things that I wanted, I wanted to get rid of course, of that 3rd year, which he granted to me early, which was pretty awesome. And I wanted to get rid of the continuing lumbar punctures because over in Britain, they actually only do it for 6 months. So it's a lot shorter than over here, especially for high hyperdiploid, which is just a fancy word I read on my son's cytogenic report, which was the report we got back from the bone marrow biopsy, that he was considered high hyperdiploid. And I'm like, oh, what is this word? I want to look this up. And so I went through a bunch of studies and found out that high hyperdiploid patients are very favorable for survival. And so over in Britain, they're only treated with lumbar punctures for 6 months. So I was like, okay, well, if he's high hyperdiploid, then why can't we have that too?
Right.
So I brought that to his attention, and I also found out that my son has MTHFR. It's basically a genetic mutation, and like 30 to 40% of the population actually has this. It basically means that your body can't detox properly. I knew that that was a thing, and I remember asking our oncologist in the early part of treatment, like, hey, can we test for this? I really want to find out if he has this. And he brushed it off and basically told me no. So I was like, all right, well, knowing me and how I am, I'm going to take this into my own hands, and found a company that could test for the MTHFR gene mutation and paid for it out of pocket. Did it on our own and found out that my son has the worst one. He has the worst form of the MTHFR gene mutation. He's homozygous for C677T. I did some more research on that, and down the line, about a year in, I found out that the exact same antibiotic that he was on, which was like, I think it was given to him every single weekend. What it's for is a prophylactic treatment for their lungs. You're not supposed to give it with MTHFR because it can cause methotrexate toxicity, and methotrexate was one of his primary chemotherapy drugs.
Okay, great.
Okay,
so now what?
So now what?
God.
So I meet with our oncologist. I want to get rid of that third year, and I bring up the methotrexate thing, and then I said, I don't want to do, it was called Bactrim, was the name of the antibiotic. I said, I don't want to do Bactrim anymore. I don't want to do methotrexate anymore. Or I don't want to do the lumbar punctures also. And what he granted to me was, you can have we'll get rid of the third year, and we will keep his methotrexate dose where it's at, because normally as they grow, they increase it. So he was already at the 100% dosage,
right,
which they would go higher than that, as he ages. He said, we'll keep him where he's at. We're going to keep doing the lumbar punctures, so I'm not giving you that. And we will change his antibiotic.
Okay.
So I walked out of there feeling a bit defeated, but we got to the parking lot, and I remember my husband just stopped me in the middle of the parking lot, and he looks in my eyes, and he's like, I know you didn't get everything that you got. He's like, but look at what you did get.
Yeah.
He's like, you got rid of an entire year of chemotherapy for our son. He's like, that is huge. And I just like broke down sobbing. Like, yes, I actually made some headway into tailoring his treatment, which was a really big deal. It was a good meeting. It was a very scary meeting, but it really solidified, my feelings of advocating for your child. And, I've always been a staunch supporter of advocating for yourself and advocating for your child, especially in the medical world. And when I finally had to really face my fear in doing that myself, it really gave me a lot more confidence, coming out after I finished crying about it, because it was so nerve-wracking. It really did make a difference. And then come to find out, probably, I think it was about maybe 8 months or so later, they actually started calling all the parents and saying, hey, we've dropped the third year of treatment. And I was kind of like, haha, we already know that, because we're already on that plan,
Yay.
So that was pretty exciting. So if you are going through anything like this, I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to do the research. Don't just listen to everything blindly. You're going to have a ton of questions, but try to find those answers out on your own too, and really advocate for your child.
Yeah.
Be careful, because you are at risk of medical kidnapping if you go too far. But just know that, and just do it for your kid. They really, really need you. And I'm happy to report that my son made it through treatment, and he is a thriving 11-year-old boy now. And looking at him, you would have no idea what he's been through. But, we have been to funerals for kids. We've been to funeral for a 2-year-old. We had a really good friend that was the same age as him pass away during this whole process. That was really hard to go through. And, we've been to events. One in particular, we did a photo shoot with a group for FAM. And, I think there was like 7 kids who were in treatment or had been through treatment in the group photo. And there's only 3 of them left. They like to say that childhood cancer is rare, but I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah. You've met so many people.
I've met so many people. And, and from what I understand and what I've read, the diagnoses of cancer in children has been steadily progressing. It has been going up, but they say that they keep saying, well, the survival rate is better, but what they're not doing is they're not looking at the survival rate past the 5 years, because they say they're cured at that 5-year mark post-treatment, but that's what they're using for their statistic for their survival rate. They're not looking what happens
with long-term survival.
They're not looking at long-term survival. I mean, I know, parents who made it to that survival mark and then lost their kid a year later,
right,
or the year after that, and they're not counted in those statistics.
Right.
So, childhood cancer is not rare, and I really want families to understand that.
It's really scary.
Anybody who cares about childhood cancer, they need to know that.
Yeah, that's really scary. But what was it that got you through this? Because you seem like a normal, thriving mom and family to, I'm sure, the outside world, right? That looks at you and they would have no idea that this happened. Like, what keeps you not in a ball in shambles all the time?
Well, I mean, I always try to look at the silver lining in things. We got through it. My poor husband had to deal with survivor's guilt. And that's pretty common for families to go through, like being faced with questions like, well, this child died and this child died. Why? What makes my kid so different? Why did they survive? I didn't particularly go through that, but that is a thing. For us, really was our faith. It was prayer. It was our community rallying around us and feeling that love and that support. I know for some people it's really hard to ask for help. But when you're in a predicament like that, don't be, I know it's easier said than done, but you got to be open. You got to be open to receiving that love and receiving that support, because people genuinely want to help.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely restored my faith in humanity, for some of the love. I mean, I remember one day just going in the mailbox and just receiving an anonymous $1,000, just don't even know who it was from, because people really do genuinely care, especially when a kid's involved. But yeah, that's the main way that we got through it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I cried a lot. And I think too, it's not a single answer to that question or a single, solution. There's so many different things. My situation was unique because I had a newborn and a 2-year-old, and they really kept me busy.
Yeah.
When I would be really upset on some days, when I was just riddled with anxiety, and my husband was it sucks, but something that I grapple with, and I know I probably need to seek therapy about, but my husband was the one that took our son to all of his appointments for the most part. After that initial 2-week stay, with my husband actually working for the hospital system, it was just easier and it made sense. I was full-time nursing a brand new baby, and I had a 2-year-old. And so he was the one to take him to all of his main appointments. And I have a lot of guilt that I hold on to that, I wasn't there. I wasn't there by his side while he was ushered off to the OR for all the different procedures that he had to have. And so it honestly brought us closer together as a family, and made us lean on each other a lot more than we ever have. Yeah, it's not to say that it wasn't hard. Majority of the time, it was very, very hard. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of guilt. Every time that my husband took him to the hospital, I was at home just shaking. Some days I would just be shaking, and I would pace the house holding my baby. And I actually was the skinniest I've ever been right after childbirth because of the stress. I lost a lot. It was an unhealthy kind of weight loss. But it was really just crying out to God and praying. I mean, I had moments in the car where I would just be screaming and praying. And after my prayer was over, it was like this weight was lifted off of my shoulders and the air was clearer. And I was like, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. Every time when they were there during a procedure, if I didn't hear back, how he was doing in a time that I felt was appropriate, and somebody wasn't calling me or texting me an update, I was always assuming the worst. They're always assuming the worst. Like, oh, he didn't come out from anesthesia, or whatever.
Right, because all those things are a risk.
Yeah, all those.
So of course you're going to freak out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we got to wrap this up, but that's our story. It's a very long-winded and complicated story. So if you got all through that, I really appreciate you listening. Just know that if you have a child that's battling cancer, you're not alone. Childhood cancer is not rare. You can feel free to you can reach out to me directly. I don't care. I will talk about it all day long. If you have questions, you're going through the same thing. Let's talk. Send us an email. ICEIpodcast@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Instagram, I think, eventually. We got to deal with this whole appeal process because they keep suspending us. But if that doesn't work out, you can also reach out to us on Facebook. Just look up the I Can't Even Imagine podcast, or it's I Can't Even Imagine - a podcast for moms. And we'll talk soon again. And next week will be Victoria's story of...
Yep, I will be sharing my experience. And I'm sure that throughout this journey on our podcast, things that maybe you left out today or things will come to you when we talk to other people.
Oh, yeah.
I know there's things that you had said today that I wanted to be like, oh, I know exactly what you were going through because this, and this, that I completely forgot happened to me.
The story will pop up again and again because it's part of who I am. It's part of my life story and a huge influence on us doing this podcast. So it's giving us a purpose.
That's right.
So whatever you do, you gotta let these traumatic events in your life once you get on the other side of things, let it give you a purpose.
Yep. Has to eventually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been for you what?
This August was 7 years.
Since diagnosis
was 7 years, and he'll be considered cured in October.
Okay, right. So it's been a while.
It's been a while.
So you've had time to reflect and think.
Give yourself grace. Give yourself time.
And let yourself scream and cry if you have to.
And come talk to us if you need to. We're here for you. All right, we will talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.